Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tables, Ladders, and Chairs. I'm your host, Eric, joined as always by my co-host, Joe. Joe, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing good after a couple of weeks layoff here. Certainly a lot going on. I had an idea of, while we were on a little sabbatical, while I was traveling the country, I wanted to be more positive on this show. I feel like we talk a lot about the poor direction WWE's gone in, and I feel like we at times just focus too much on the bad. And so I wanted to focus more on the positive. And then the news came out yesterday
Yeah.
and shot my whole plan to hell. So there's no sense hiding from it. Joe, why don't we go ahead and get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. So of course, yesterday we find out the news on, what was yesterday? Wednesday, June the 2nd, which will be a bloody Wednesday in the history of WWE. The release of such superstars as Ruby Riott, Santana Garrett, Lana, Buddy Murphy, and then the two big ones that came as a big shock to me, Aleister Black and Braun Strowman.
Yeah.
I mean, your initial reaction when you hear those six names?
Is WWE trying to lose the company?
Yeah, right? That's kind of the way it seems.
Like, Braun Strowman, and I could do without him. But Aleister Black, man, he's going to go somewhere and become world champion.
Yeah.
Bring in, millions of dollars for another company.
Oh, absolutely. I just look at it and I just think, how is WWE planning to make money now? Like, I mean, look, I know you don't like Braun Strowman, but this guy was just in the main event, okay, of one of your pay-per-views, of WrestleMania Backlash. This was a guy who a year ago was in one of your main events for WrestleMania, winning the Universal title from Goldberg.
Because of the situation.
Well, sure, but still, situation aside, you had him in a marquee match at WrestleMania. He just wrestled a McMahon at this past WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And your reaction? Oh, we'll just let him go. We'll just let him go. And I don't know. I don't know what to even say about this. I don't know. To me, it just says nobody is safe.
That's true. Like I told you yesterday, all these guys do amazing in NXT because they're under the tutelage of Triple H and Shawn Michaels.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was watching the Shawn Michaels biography, and I saw him coaching the guys on how to do a ladder match, and the guys were just like, "This is friggin' amazing!" Like Shawn Michaels is probably one of the best coaches in the business, and
Absolutely.
and I just feel like the team that's running NXT is doing a million times better than the team that's running Raw or SmackDown.
Yeah. To me, that's where the releases should be coming from, is on that creative team, on the team that is in charge of booking these shows. Like, I mean, look, I had to sit through at WrestleMania Backlash, Damian Priest versus The Miz in a lumberjack match. And I thought, I'm like, okay, that'll be cool. They'll put some people out around the ring. It'll be fun. They put freaking zombies out there.
That to me sounds like an actual cool idea because it was something different, and like that's something like you like out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, this is a cool idea. Like, because with all the neat ideas that AEW is doing, WWE has to do something, or they're going to lose horribly.
See, but what I was really hoping they were going to do with that was more of a putting them in this lumberjack match, having lumberjacks around the ring. You could utilize guys who haven't been utilized in a while, and maybe create some new rivalries, like like between someone with The Miz and Morrison, or someone against Damian Priest. Like either way, whoever loses sort of loses in an underhanded tactic because of one of the lumberjacks, and then you set up your next rivalry as a like. They need to find more ways to transition. That's one of the things WWE has done a very poor job over the last couple of years, is transitioning rivalries, and it was something that it seemed they were really good at, in years past. That seamless transition, you go from the Shield feuding with Evolution to then all of a sudden Seth Rollins joining Evolution and feuding with the other members of the Shield. Like the seamless transitions that you go through that are just natural in like this. WWE is missing. Like, how are we moving Seth Rollins along? Like he's stuck in this never-ending feud with Cesaro. And there's really nowhere for him to move on from. And Cesaro, as much as we tried to put him in the main event picture, now here we are again with him in this situation with Seth Rollins, in which even if you delay it and say, okay, Seth's going to face somebody else at Hell in a Cell because of the injury sustained by Cesaro during the attack by Seth Rollins. Well, where do you go after that? Like, what's the next step in this rivalry? Are we having a next step to it? Is it just going to be the two of them fighting it out for the next 3 months and nothing really being settled, much like Seth Rollins, Rey Mysterio a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, like they're having Drew McIntyre versus Bobby Lashley again.
It's funny, and I know a lot of people are complaining about that. And is like my only complaint about that is that they haven't done a lot of unique match types to it.
Right, it's been just plain Jane matches.
Yeah, they had the one-on-one match, which you needed to have just plain one-on-one at WrestleMania. That's fine. But then, you had the triple threat. You threw in Braun Strowman, who then subsequently, I don't know if he pissed somebody off during that match. To me, he did his job. He ate the pin and set it up to where you could have Lashley versus Drew McIntyre again and still feel like it's, I won't say fresh, but at least to where it's not like, okay, well, Lashley just beat him. Like, Lashley didn't win clean at WrestleMania. MVP got involved.
Yeah.
And cost Drew McIntyre the match. And then Drew McIntyre hits the move that sets up Bobby Lashley retaining the championship.
Right. It just, they're not giving us anything fresh. Like, they're giving us all stale product now.
Well, with the releases that they've had, like, you're starting to run out of guys that you can give us something fresh with.
Yep. And that's where AEW is going to reap all the benefits, because they're going to sign Braun Strowman and probably Ruby Riott and definitely Aleister Black.
And they might even sign Lana. They have the inside track with Rusev, Miro being there.
God, Mark Henry just went there.
Yeah.
Like, WWE, wake up. Like, you're losing talent to a company, and, like, it kind of, like, I don't think WWE knows what to do with their talent. Come on, man. You got Randy Orton and Matt Riddle tagging together.
Which I think is entertaining as all hell, but...
Yeah, it's cool, but Randy Orton should be in the title picture, not tagging with some hippie, doped out character dude.
Well, what I'm hoping this is going to turn into is that Randy Orton brings the serious side out of Riddle. That's the hope for me.
I'm hoping so because
it almost seems like them teaming is almost anticlimactic. I'm not worried about them teaming. I'm already thinking about the rivalry that's going to come when Randy Orton eventually turns on Riddle.
Oh, yeah. And we all know that's going to happen because that's Randy Orton's nature.
Sure.
But it's just I don't know, I have no desire to watch any more WWE pay-per-views at the moment because you're not setting me up to be excited. How are they so far behind every other sport when every other sport is back to 100% capacity and WWE's not doing it for another month and a half maybe?
Well, July 16th is their first live show in front of it. Look, it's not as simple as you think. These other sports, they all have their home arenas that they're already able to book right away. WWE has to go out and book their shows months in advance. It's not as simple as saying, "Oh, we have our home arena and we'll start. We can start doing our shows there and letting crowds in." The AEW had the advantage in which Tony Khan is the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so he owns Daly's Place where they've been taping for the last year and a half. And so it was just a matter of letting the crowd in.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's really not fair to compare them in that sense. Because WWE, they have to book all their arenas with other places, and they don't want to go out on tour to places that weren't having 100% capacity. Even if a place says, "Oh, we'll let you have 50% of the crowd," well, that doesn't make sense for a WWE audience. Okay, we're going to have 50% there, and then what are we going to do? Just socially distance fans. It worked for WrestleMania because they were able to do an outdoor venue, and they were able to position it to where it didn't come across as a small time feel. I feel if they were touring right now, going to places that one, you've got to find venues that are willing to say, okay, we have we're in areas where they have 100% capacity, which isn't everywhere. It's almost everywhere, but it's not quite everywhere. We're close. And I think WWE wanted to set it up to where once they go out on tour, there's no half-assing this. They're back and they've got 100% crowds. They're able to go anywhere and WWE full speed ahead. I really do think that this is going to be a summer that fans show up to things. There's going to be a lot of people at a lot of sporting events.
Oh yeah.
If your baseball team's pseudo in the race in July and August, dude, you're going to see some packed houses in places that you're not used to seeing packed houses.
Oh yeah, because everybody's been
they've been all cooped up for the last year plus. And I think by the same token, WWE is going to reap the benefits. I think they wanted to plan it out. They wanted to do it right. They didn't want to rush into it and be like, "Oh yeah, we're just going to go hit Florida," where it seems like their governor hasn't cared about their people's health since the beginning of this thing. Hell, they were trying to pack houses in September for college football. And granted, that didn't end up happening, but that's what they were trying to do then. In Jacksonville, they were able to put crowds in there since what, November, December?
Mm-hmm.
Now, not full crowds, but that's what WWE's looking at. They're looking at, they want to be able to go out there onto, they're going to be in Texas where, again, they were another state that was really early on the mask mandate being lifted and getting back to full capacity crowds. So they're starting off with quite a few stops in Texas and in Florida. They planned it out very well. You have they have to make an agreement with the arena. WWE, again, unlike, basketball and football, like, they don't have to come up with an agreement with the arena. It's booked months and months in advance. Like, the NBA schedule comes out, like, what, in July or August?
Mm-hmm.
And then they start playing and that is booked October through April. So asking WWE and sitting there and saying, "Hey, capacity crowds are being let in, and why aren't you on the road 3 weeks later?" Like, it's really not fair when all these other, sports, like, they're given months to prepare where they're going to be at.
True.
So I think WWE did, in that sense, handle that as well as they could. It's just everything. Like, you're telling me Vince McMahon couldn't handle this kind of pandemic? Like, I mean, to me, that's what it looks like. That WWE was not built to withstand something like this.
Yeah, because, God, they've gotten rid of, what, like at least 30 guys?
And that's just in the last couple months.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to see, and I'm sure somebody out there on the internet has a list of every superstar that has been released from WWE since the start of the pandemic. I would love to see that. And I know that's what Joe's on right now. But I want to talk, and while you're doing that, I'll just go into the conversation about Hell in a Cell, the decision to move that pay-per-view from October to June, mainly because they want to do Money in the Bank in front of a live crowd. I think they're okay putting Hell in a Cell in this situation because, like, sometimes in an arena, the cell kind of manipulates people's views. And so they're thinking, well, if everybody's watching from a TV, it's cool. We can do Hell in a Cell in June. Like, this is one instance where we don't have to worry about it. Like, yeah, put it in June and we can just let the guys go crazy and the fans won't be worried about not being able to see the action. And whereas Money in the Bank is going to be the first pay-per-view on Sunday, July 18th, where we will have fans in attendance for Money in the Bank. It'll be the first weekend that they're back on tour. I know it starts in, I think it starts in Houston, and I know Monday Night Raw is in Dallas. I'm not sure where Money in the Bank is going to be. I'll have to look at. I'll have that answer for everybody for next week. But yeah, Money in the Bank is that Sunday, July 18th. That's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, getting back out there, and again, with the exception of WrestleMania, this will be the first time in front of a live crowd in over a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
And I know it's something like I kind of touched on it earlier when I said that I feel like this summer is going to be like fans are going to come out in droves. I do think that, like, for those that were able to withstand this pandemic, like, I think that the 2020s could be a lot like the 1920s in the, like, that again, coming off the flu pandemic of 1918, in which the Roaring 20s were ones where people, like, they were cooped up, much like this past year, the flu. Like, they spent money, they went on trips, they lived a more lavish lifestyle in the 1920s, the Roaring 20s, and I think we could see something similar with people coming out of this pandemic. Because after being, cooped up, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be anxious to get out there and enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
To go to more sporting events. Like, I mean, I'm having people talk to me all the time about, hey, I want to go to this ball game. I want to go to that ball game. And, like, yeah. And, like, I've got season tickets to the Eagles, and I am beyond excited to get back out to the stadium. Now, it'll be the first game anyway for me will be a little bittersweet, for personal reasons. But, like, after that, man, it's going to be a party atmosphere at those games this year. And I'm sure, like, for those who are going to Phillies games, maybe not so much Phillies games, but Like the Sixers last night, their first game in front of a full crowd since March. And man, that place was rocking. Like I was watching, you could feel it through the TV screen.
Yeah. Well, especially how good they're doing. Like that's incredible.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and look, the Wizards were going neck and neck with the Sixers last night throughout most of the game. Fourth quarter, it almost felt like the fans willed the Sixers to win.
Oh, yeah.
Like that crowd basically just said, "No, we're not losing tonight. It's not happening."
Yeah. Well, we're going to a Phillies game on Saturday.
Are you?
Yeah.
Nice.
First one.
Nice. I've been contemplating when I want to get to my first game. Now, because again, it'll be, for me, again, a real bittersweet first trip to a ball game, without my dad.
Yeah.
And so I've been, like, part of me has almost been wondering, should I just hold off and make that first one the first Eagles game? But I also don't want to miss out on going to, like, Phillies games. Like, me and a friend of mine, we like to go once a year, take a trip down to Baltimore. We have our spot at a sports bar right outside the stadium there called Pickles. I'll give them a free plug right here on the show. That, like, it's a fun sports bar. We always like to go to a couple hours before the game, get a little lathered up and, and then go in and enjoy an Orioles game. And, like, let's be honest, with the way the Orioles have played the last few years, that's the only way to really enjoy them.
Yeah.
To have a healthy buzz before you get in there.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I mean, that's one of my yearly traditions. Of course, like, the Flyers are done, so I don't have to worry about them until after football season starts.
True.
And then there's going to the Phillies games. I mean, that is, I feel like I want to do it, but like I said, I've been kind of hesitant because it'll be my first game without my dad, and that's going to be weird for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's tough because to not go to a Phillies game, especially.
I know it's really weird for me because I usually like to go to at least a couple. And look, the first time WWE comes to town, I'm going to be looking to get tickets to go. I keep getting the invites to do the virtual thing, but I have, and a couple of times I've gone on and registered for it, but I've never gone on to I've never like logged in and like sat there and been part of the crowd. Like it just, I don't know.
You should do it.
Like I'd just be watching the show on my computer, not really like I don't feel like it would feel like I'm in the arena.
I'm curious to see what it looks like.
I know. Part of me wants to do it just so I can come on here and talk about it.
You should.
All right.
Do it tomorrow night, and then we can talk about next Thursday.
All right. Well, tomorrow night I'm actually traveling down to Maryland. It's my cousin's. Well, actually, last week was her 30th birthday, and so I'm going down to celebrate it in a little town in Maryland.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So going down there tomorrow night. I'll try to set it up to where I can be on Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, then we can talk about it next Thursday.
Yeah. Even though Raw has been it's by far the worst show of any, like in my mind, of any of the wrestling shows that I watch.
It's so stale. Like they're not doing anything. Like I haven't even seen AJ and Umas in a while.
Well, they defended the tag titles this past week against Elias and Jackson Riker, and they basically broke up the tag team of Elias and Jackson Riker.
Wow.
So, like, they had Elias turn on Jackson Riker in the match. It was kind of weird. Like, I just sat there, like, why would they do this? Why now? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Like, you got to build that up. You can't just break up a tag team randomly. Like, you got to show, like, frustration. Like, oh, you cost me the match,
Well, in the match, there was only one situation I really looked at and said, oh, okay, this makes sense why there might be something here. And it was Jackson Riker makes a blind tag, tagging himself in. And Elias kind of looks back like, what are you doing? And And that was the whole setup for their turn. And of course, last week, Jackson Riker beats AJ Styles, of course, with Elias's help in a one-on-one match. And I'm like, holy crap, like, that's huge. Jackson Riker just beat a Grand Slam champion. Like, I hope they do something to make that, like, meaningful.
Yeah.
Maybe give Riker a push.
I doubt it.
But, yeah, it doesn't seem like they're going to. That doesn't seem like a very WWE thing to do these days. To have a guy get a surprise win like that and then get a push.
They don't know how to use their talent, I'm telling you.
But with their releases that they just had, and those were significant names. Like, I mean, I know they hadn't done much with Murphy, but they've been building up this return of Aleister Black with this Dark Father character. Braun Strowman in the position he was. The 3 women that were let go were at least 2 of them were in prominent tag teams.
Uh-huh.
So now I saw, the list of active together women's tag teams. It is Mandy, Dana Brooke, and the tag team champions, Natalya and Tamina. That's it. There are no other, like, currently formed, like, because you kind of have it looking like Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler looking like they're breaking up. When Shayna Baszler beats up I guess it's supposed to be Nia Jax's boyfriend in Reginald.
So dumb.
Like, that typically doesn't work well for tag team cohesion.
No, it's like the women tag team belts are not that old, and for them to be not putting more effort, like they did that whole entire thing about how the women of wrestling were evolving the sport, and now you're pretty much taking it away because you're not doing anything with them.
Well,
like, if I was
there's teams they could form pretty easily. Like, I would love to see them put Asuka and Io Shirai together. Like, I think that would be an awesome tag team. Because, I mean, it's basically just replacing, why can't I think of her name right now?
The other...
Kairi Sane.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're basically replacing Kairi Sane with Io Shirai. And I think Io Shirai is better than what Kairi Sane was.
Yeah.
So you can do that. Maybe call up a couple. Like, I think they need to call up a few NXT stars to come up here and try to give the main roster, and particularly Monday Night Raw, some star power.
See, I just think if you call people up, they're just going to fail because they're not doing anything with them. Right?
Well, look, I realize what they've done, but there's nothing you can do about what's already been done. All you can do is just try something different and call up some guys and just hope it's going to go different this time.
Yeah, I mean, now you got Bayley back in the hunt for the women's title. It's like, why Bayley? Like, she just had like one of the longest title runs in history. Like, give someone else a shot.
Sure, and I would say put Bayley, like, when Sasha Banks, I don't know where Sasha Banks is at and what's going on. I'm assuming she's either making a movie or they're just giving her some time off. But, like, you don't need to have the title around Bayley or Sasha Banks for that rivalry to be meaningful.
Right. And
you could put them one-on-one and just say grudge match, one of the greatest rivalries in the history of women's wrestling, Sasha Banks and Bayley. And I mean, they had 2 of the greatest NXT bouts, period. I'm not talking about just women's matches. I'm talking about just matches in NXT. And everybody rants and raves about how great NXT is. Those 2 women put on 2 of the greatest matches in the short history of NXT.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not one that, like, there are plenty of people, and I hope I say this right because I don't want it to come across as sexist when I say this. there's a lot of people who tend to rate superstars or put matches higher on their ranking because, hey, we want to elevate women's wrestling. So when I say that, like, I think that Sasha Banks and Bayley have put on two of the greatest matches in NXT history, I am not saying that as an advocate for women's wrestling, even though I try to be one. Like, I am saying that because I simply believe if you take gender out of the equation, take everything else out of the equation, and just say, hey, we're going to watch two wrestlers tell a story, you're going to have a hard time finding two superstars that get together and have the kind of chemistry to tell a story better than Sasha Banks and Bayley.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you don't need to have a title in the picture for that to be the case.
What?
Like, I mean, Sasha Banks just randomly shows back up during one of Bayley's knock knock hello segments where maybe she just tries to say, oh, I'm going to interview the greatest superstar of all time, me, and like comes out there and tries to do this farce of an interview. Sasha Banks shows how the hell far have you fallen?
Yeah.
And that can just spark a rivalry right there between the two of them. And then after that, you can start getting into, oh, okay, one of them is going to go after the women's championship again.
Yeah.
Because then you have, it's like a natural progression. You have flow. It's organic, that move to the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that has been lacking from WWE. There's nothing organic about the progress. Like we talked about, Seth Rollins randomly shows up at the end of Cesaro and Roman Reigns' match at Backlash. And it's like, okay, like, we get it. Seth Rollins and Cesaro had a rivalry, and like, I guess it's his way of saying it's not over. But to me, it felt random. It felt forced. It felt like, okay, you closed that chapter at WrestleMania. You didn't need to rip that book back open then. You had naturally moved Cesaro out of that feud and into a universal title feud, and you could have progressed that and had Roman and Cesaro in a Hell in a Cell match, and that would have worked. And you could, have Seth Rollins do his little blackout thing where, like, in fact, it seemed like this is what they were setting up a year ago, which was where Seth Rollins would snap and do things and then not remember it. Like, if you recall, the original time that he was supposed to have injured Rey Mysterio, when he gets to the back, like, he was frozen on the apron, not really moving. It was the night after he had lost to Drew McIntyre at Money in the Bank. And so it's like, it almost seemed like he was just in a trance, and then he just snaps and goes nuts on Rey Mysterio. And then actually he doesn't remember it. I thought, man, we could be onto something here. Like, this could be a great story. And then they never did anything with it. Uh-huh. And then they kind of did it on SmackDown where it's like he didn't remember beating the hell out of Cesaro. And I'm hoping that's what they're doing now, where it's going to be where Seth Rollins just kind of snap, like something happens and he just snaps, and like you start to figure out, okay, this guy just goes to another level and doesn't know what he's doing. Because you do that, you could have him have a run-in with anybody.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be Cesaro. It can be, whoever you want from SmackDown, that he just kind of shows up and it's like, snap. And then he's in a rivalry with that guy. Uh-huh. Like, you could do that now with Big E. And it could be Seth Rollins and Big E can have this nice personal rivalry that goes on for a little while. Like, I'd prefer not to see it with Kevin Owens just because it's not that long ago that Seth and Kevin Owens had that rivalry. But if you did it with KO, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But to me, Cesaro, it's like, okay, we just saw this. It's like that rinse and repeat method that like Raw was doing for the last like 6 months before we went into the pandemic. Uh-huh. I really think they have stuff that they can work with, they can expand on. It's just a matter of whether or not the creative is going to do it, and how are they going to adjust. Like, Braun Strowman's a huge, like, I know you don't like him, but he was a main event attraction.
Yeah, kind of.
Well, but like it wasn't outside the realm of possibilities to say, okay, within a couple matches, we put Braun Strowman in the main event and he can challenge for the WWE title.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're kind of missing that. Like, who do you do that with? AJ Styles, I know he's a guy who, at any point, I feel like they can position him to challenge for the WWE title or Universal title whenever they want. But, like, it's important to have guys that you can do that with. And they're very limited. AJ Styles and, to me, Seth Rollins are the only two they can really do that with. And they've both been booked as heels for so long that it'd be hard to then transition them and say, if, like, say they wanted to position Seth Rollins to go after Roman Reigns, it's going to be hard to kind of position that now because of how you've stuck Seth in this role of being this monster heel. And you'd basically be saying, okay, because we don't want to change up Roman and make Roman the babyface, like, now we're going to ask fans to cheer for Seth Rollins, a guy who we positioned them to hate for the last, like, year and a half.
I mean, I can cheer for Seth Rollins at any
Oh, sure, so could I. I think the hardcore fan does, but you know that, like, that's not what WWE does. They don't cater to the hardcore fan. They cater to the family fans, the guys who are bringing their kids there.
Uh-huh.
And so, how are you positioning Seth Rollins to be the babyface? Like, the time to have done that would have been when he came back after his daughter was born.
Yeah.
Like, if they had positioned Seth Rollins to come back and all of a sudden be this, talk about being a changed man and how he's determined he wants to get back to being Seth freaking Rollins, the workhorse of WWE, like, that would have been something I could have gotten behind.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, if they come out this Friday and Seth comes out and is just like, oh, yeah, I want to get back to being the workhorse, like, it just feels forced.
Yep.
I mean, you could position him to be like, maybe he tags with Roman, they have some fallout, and you could move towards it. But now I feel like it takes more work.
Yeah, it definitely does.
So, okay, right now we don't, like, all we have set up for Hell in a Cell, and I know it's in 3 weeks, is Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley. We don't really have anybody in line for the Universal title. I'm just curious, if you had your judges based on who's on SmackDown and the positioning they're on, who would you like to see given the opportunity at Hell in a Cell?
I don't know. Wouldn't mind seeing another rematch with Cesaro.
Yeah, I'm with you. That I'm always going to be with you on Cesaro. I'll give you a different name, Big E.
Okay.
Would love to see Big E, Roman Reigns at Hell in a Cell. Although, to me, if you put Cesaro in the match, it makes more sense to say Roman and Cesaro inside Hell in a Cell.
Yeah.
Like, if it's Roman and Big E, like, their first match shouldn't be a Hell in a Cell match, because then how do you do a full program with them? Because you've already had the big blowout.
Uh-huh.
The only other thing I think would be really, really cool is if Edge randomly showed up this Friday on SmackDown, and then you set up Edge versus Roman Reigns at Hell in a Cell inside Hell in a Cell.
Yeah. I would watch that.
Although I personally think Edge's next match will be when you get full crowds again.
Probably.
Like, I think Edge will be at July 16th SmackDown. That's one of my predictions. And another name I've heard WWE planning for this summer. Get ready for it. Mr. Hustle, Loyalty, Respect, John Cena.
Oh, wow.
It is like, it's almost beyond rumor. It's almost like a known fact. John Cena will be back this summer to be part of the, the lead up to SummerSlam. I don't know if their plan is to have John Cena break Ric Flair's record this summer. Because, I mean, to me, if you're not going to have it at WrestleMania, SummerSlam's the next best thing. And SummerSlam coming off the end of the pandemic, which supposedly SummerSlam's going to be in Las Vegas Saturday, August 21st, which I'm just excited that it's a Saturday.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, that's the hot rumor. Saturday, August 21st. And in Las Vegas, Nevada, SummerSlam.
Nice.
No. And that'll be, of course, like I said, Money in the Bank will be the first pay-per-view in front of live crowds again. And, of course, looking forward to that. Lots to talk about. I mean, we've been at this 40 minutes, and we haven't even talked about anything going on right now in AEW. And like you talked about, a lot of these names that have been released. And Tony Khan's got to be salivating at the idea of signing some of these guys. It's like he was still working on trying to sign the last batch of releases by WWE, and now he's got a new batch to try and focus in on.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, like, to me, I think Andrade is going to be signed by AEW at some point. He makes so much sense for them. Aleister Black, man, he makes perfect sense. He will go to AEW, and he will be in position for the TNT Championship in like 2 months.
Uh-huh.
And probably like in line for, the AEW. Like, if you told me right now, Aleister Black versus Kenny Omega for the AEW World Championship, like, sign me up.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, man. Like, if WWE had wanted to, Aleister Black versus Roman Reigns for the Universal title would have sold out the first SmackDown in front of live crowds.
Yep.
Braun Strowman versus Drew McIntyre, or Braun Strowman versus Lashley on the first Monday Night Raw, in front of a live crowd, that would have sold out in an arena. It's a shame. But, we let in, and I want to close out the show with talking about the speculation that it seems to be growing louder and louder that WWE is going to be getting sold. Now, I wanted to talk about, before we get into the selling of WWE, because I feel like that's going to be our last big topic. The hot rumor, New Japan Pro Wrestling and WWE are going to be working together. I wonder if it's going to be a la Worlds Collide, which was basically all NXT involved. I wouldn't be surprised to see NXT almost exclusively working with New Japan. But to me, it's like a lot of the guys that are in NXT are directly from New Japan. Like, it's not a big deal if you give me Kushida versus Okada, because they worked on the same company in New Japan.
Uh-huh.
But if you give me, say, I don't know, Riddle versus Okada, I'd be into that. You give me Seth Rollins versus Tatsuya Naito, I'd certainly be into that. Or Seth Rollins versus Jay White. Like, there's a lot of different ways. Omos versus Bad Luck Valet.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you know all those names that I was just throwing at you from New Japan, but let me tell you, one guy I seriously, when we get off the show, because I know you won't know this name either, but Minoru Suzuki versus Sheamus. Just when you get off here, YouTube Minoru Suzuki. Any of his matches, dude is a legit freaking tough guy. I'm 40 years old. I think that guy could give me nightmares.
Jeez.
Like, dude is just straight up a beast. and wrestles like he is just the most legit tough guy in the business. He is a throwback to the days of like Harley Race and Stan Hansen and some of like those real brutes who like, yeah, we know this is a work, but that dude would really knock your freaking teeth out. So I would love to see like him versus Sheamus. My God, the physicality. Or Minoru Suzuki versus Drew McIntyre. The physicality would be off the page. And like, it's funny because like in that sense, when I start talking about that, I get really excited. And then when we start talking about the possibility of WWE being sold, now I don't think it would be the end of the world. Like I think the WWE would still prosper. They'd probably still retain a lot of WWE officials in order to make the company profitable. Like Disney owns ESPN. They didn't completely alter ESPN to make it like some gimmicky thing. I don't think that they would do anything like that with WWE. It could be the end of WWE on Peacock, which to me, sayonara. And then WWE Network goes on to Disney Plus. Although they might have to wait the 2 years that, like, because they live out the contract that they have with Peacock, and then in 2 years, all of a sudden WWE Network shows up on Disney Plus, which would certainly just mean, okay, I guess I get Disney Plus, which I'm debating anyway.
It's good.
Is it? Well, I mean, I'd get it just to watch all the Star Wars, but
yeah,
and then the Marvel movies too.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I just want to leave that with a final thought, everybody. Part of these releases, some people have been speculating, have been trying to position the company to become more sellable, so that they could, make a sale. WWE being sold to Disney. I mean, look, Vince McMahon's what, 72 years old, 73? Like, he's not going to, like, as much as we like to think of it, he's not going to live forever. And I know we think creatively he's out of touch, but, like, from a business standpoint, can Triple H and Stephanie and Shane, like, this has become bigger than just a family business. Like, they're going to have some real people come in who can have some real visions on how to change things and how to get the company moving forward. And that's where I do think Disney would have that forward thinking of knowing, okay, this is a product that has been around since like the early infant days of the carnivals. Like that's how wrestling got started. It was a carny thing. And like, and the fact that it's grown to what it has, like it shows that there's a product there. There's a fan base. And as much as we like to think that a lot of people look down on pro wrestling, Disney's going to look at that and see dollar signs. Like, I don't think they're going to do anything to try and take away from pro wrestling. I think, if anything, they're going to try to get back to what made wrestling great. And so a Disney purchase of WWE, like, wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing. Like, it would be the end of an era because then all of a sudden it's like it's no longer the McMahons owning it. But I think it would change some things. Like you might see a legitimate Hall of Fame. Like what they have right now is not real. Like, I mean, there's very few people that I would say like, don't belong in the Hall of Fame that Vince has put in. But like, and when I say legitimate Hall of Fame, like they might say, okay, we're going to hire a group that's their job is to evaluate who belongs in the Hall of Fame. It's not going to just be Vince McMahon saying, hey, I want to put this guy in the Hall of Fame. And then maybe you'll get a physical Hall of Fame. Like maybe they'll put it somewhere, like in Stamford, Connecticut, or if it's owned by Disney, maybe it'll be in Orlando, where it could be part of like your Disney experiences. Hey, come see Disney World. We've got the rides and the characters for the kids. We've got, like Epcot Center for the drunken moms who want to go there and do beers around the world. And hey, for the guys and the come check out the WWE Hall of Fame, located as part of Disney World. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
All right. We'll certainly get into more stuff next week. I know you had an idea, and I want to tease it tonight. You texted it to me a couple weeks ago, and I loved it. So I'm going to bring it up tonight as something that we'll tease for next week. The idea of if you and I say we're going to get handed $1 billion, okay? But the caveat is we have to start a wrestling promotion with that money. And who are we going out to get? And I'm not going to just say, oh, let's go, we'll sign Roman Reigns, we'll sign Drew McIntyre. No, I want to say, like, what guy do you think is a guy that you would say we're taking as a young talent and we're going to build our company around? And ideally, guys that aren't currently affiliated with either WWE or AEW. So that's something we'll talk about next week.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody, have a great weekend. If you want to catch up, maybe I'll also talk next week about my adventures in my travels across the country last week. Because let me tell you, had a great time hanging out with my cousins, just driving all over the place. Started off in Philadelphia on a Thursday morning at 2 a.m. and drove. We were in Denver, Colorado the next day by 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And then spent the day in Denver. After that, drove to Vegas, spent a night in Las Vegas, drove out to L.A., spent a day out in L.A., driving back, we spent the night at a couple places: Albuquerque, New Mexico, Memphis, Tennessee, and then had an incredible night in Nashville before heading home. So that song "I've Been Everywhere," man, I was everywhere over the course of about a week and a half.
Jeez.
But everybody have a great night. Stay safe. Joe, anything to add before we get out of here?
No.
All right. But anybody who checked in on us, thanks for checking in. And maybe give your thoughts on the state of WWE, the releases that we had, and where you think we go from here. So until next time, everybody, have a great night and happy wrestling.
Happy wrestling.